Welcome back to another Mobalytics video, and it's patch week again with loads of new changes and buff champions to get stuck into. So here's some of the best picks for this new patch for you to play. Before we get started, make sure you hit the link in the description to check out our website and get yourself set up with all of the builds, guides and content that we have for every single champion. Whether it's short videos explaining how to play a champion or learning the highest win rate builds for your pick, we have got you covered. Anyway, let's dive straight into it and start off with our first pick of the patch, which is going to have to be Gangplank. Gangplank has not been weak for quite some time, and I'm sure you've all seen those highlights of talented Gangplank one-tricks deleting entire teams with just a few barrels. Well, Gangplank was definitely strong enough and has been for a while. However, he definitely performs better in those higher ranks where people really know this champion's limits. Gangplank is a scaling melee hypercarry with a ton of ranged combos and bursts with his barrels, Q and ultimate. Late game he has an unthinkable amount of damage, and if he knows what he's doing and lands a few combos, you're going to have a very difficult time beating him. This patch he's received some buffs to his passive damage and his W2, which is his cleanse and his self-heal. Both of these buffs are adding to an already strong champion, and this means he's only going to get better. Gangplank may take some serious practice, but if you can learn him you will definitely be rewarded. Oh, and by the way, this champion is also incredibly fun, so if you main top lane and haven't given him a go yet, now is a better time than ever. Our next pick is Wukong, and he's received some pretty hefty buffs this patch. Wukong, similar to Gangplank, has not been weak recently by any means, but he has been a little bit underrated and underplayed. Wukong was already a great duelist and could snowball very quickly with his early game damage and burst. Well, now Riot have buffed his jungle clear and also granted his clone the ability to jump over walls now. This change is absolutely awesome and not only modernizes Wukong and brings him up to date a bit, but it also makes him borderline broken. Wukong has always had damage, mobility, burst and crazy AoE damage and CC, but now he keeps all of that and now becomes harder to deal with due to these clone changes. Wukong can play in the solo lanes too, but it's really in the jungle which is where he's benefiting most from these changes. He can now gank from super unpredictable and unwalled areas, flank much easier, and he's now very hard to invade too because he's strong in 1v1s, and if he doesn't want to fight, he can just jump over a wall to escape. We just haven't seen enough of this champion before this patch, but now all you're going to see is jungle Wukong one-tricks. So you might as well join the hype train. Neeko in the mid lane has also received some more buffs, and she's already very strong going into this patch. Neeko's had a surprisingly high win rate since her buffs earlier on in the season, and despite still being very underplayed. Neeko offers so many strengths that allow her to carry games at the moment. She has good catch potential in lane and good kill threat. She has jukes and baits with her passive and her W, and her ultimate is an insanely good ability for teamfighting and skirmishing overall. Neeko's ultimate in combination with her flash and Zhonya's make her an amazing initiating mid lane threat, and this can translate into tons of easily won teamfights just by the use of this one ability. Neeko's buffs this week have also encouraged people to pick up on hit Neeko again, which adds to her already strong itemization and build options. Neeko still has a low pick rate, and a lot of people don't know how to play her or play against her, but if you are one of the few that does main her, I'm sure you're very happy this patch. Yasuo has received some buffs after those lifesteal nerfs back in 12.6. Yasuo already had a respectable win rate in the bot lane for the last few months, and these changes are only going to make that even better. He is a fantastic answer to a lot of AD carry matchups. His win rule completely shuts them down, and his relentless mobility and damage a lot of AD carries just can't deal with, especially if they don't have much mobility themselves. As soon as his enemy has burned their flash, if Yasuo knows how to abuse this, they can punish them so easily and so often. Yasuo's ultimate is now on a lower cooldown too, meaning he can fight more often and abuse his early game damage and kill threat easier. Yasuo works insanely well with so many support champions too, and under their protection he's actually far safer than he is in the solo lanes. Any supports with knockups are the obvious choices, as this just oozes tons of aggression and early kills. Other supports with sustain and peel though also help him out massively, as these give him the opportunity to farm up safely and scale with very little risk of being punished. If you are good enough to pull this off, Yasuo in the bot lane is a fantastic choice this patch. Talon in the mid lane is back with a bang after his absolute dominance back in season 11, where he just out-jungled everyone in the game for such a long time. Talon in the mid lane is doing all of these things he used to do back then, and he's winning a hell of a lot of games right now. Talon has a couple of build options too. He can go full assassin and one-shot everyone as you'd expect, or he can jump on the bruiser train and go for Gore Drinker and Death Stance instead. This build still grants him plenty of damage to do his job, however now it's actually really hard to get hold of him and kill him. You can still jump around the map parkouring over walls and killing everyone all the time, but now you're far harder to shut down with this bruiser setup. The healing, survivability and damage from this build is quite infuriating to play against, so if you haven't experienced it yet, you're quite lucky. Bruiser Talon mid is not that popular, but it is very, very strong, so give it a go if you haven't already. Kalista received some buffs this patch, and unfortunately she's just not been around recently due to her low range and her poor performances all round. There are still a few Kalista masters running around the rift, but a lot less often than we used to see. These buffs are without a doubt going to make a difference though, and in the right draft and against and with the right champions, she can still be an insanely strong champion. Kalista has struggled against all of the burst and the long range in the game recently, which is why her unique playstyle hasn't been as preferred and as effective. However, she's still very good when the stars align. She has a stupid amount of mobility, easily the highest out of any AD carry. Her damage and burst is huge, and her lifesteal and survivability is also very hard to compete with. Kalista works super well with a large variety of supports too, whether it's hard engage with the ultimate with a tank or keeping that pocket healer Soraka safe and sound. Whichever combination you go for, with these buffs Kalista is definitely a lot stronger this patch, but she still will take a huge amount of skill and practice. Lillia also got buffs this patch, and for a lot of players they already think she's very strong, and I honestly have to agree for the most part. Lillia is a very misunderstood champion, and a lot of people just don't really understand how to play her. She's all about stacking up that movement speed and then darting and weaving in and out of fights, dealing consistent damage slowly but surely until she can dive in and finish them off. Lillia's ultimate allows her to send potentially an entire team to sleep, and if she pulls this off well, it's likely going to win her the team fight and maybe even the game. Lillia just seems to deal so much damage when she gets ahead as well. That Liandry's Anguish makes her tick so much damage over time, and then if she gets up close and personal, she also deals a decent amount of burst damage. Lillia does take a lot more skill than you'd think, and she does have a fairly unique playstyle, but with buff after buff she's only getting stronger, so right now she's kind of borderline abusable if you know what you're doing. Pantheon also received some major changes this patch, and this champion, like quite a few others on this list, was secretly already performing really well. Pantheon's got some big quality of life changes as well as some small reworks and buffs. His Q is now more of a sniping and poking ability rather than an AoE chunk, and his ultimate now drops a little bit faster, allowing you to pull it off more often for its damage rather than just its ganking global presence. Pantheon in that mid lane has had a very surprising win rate for the last few patches, so people are now going to realise just how strong he can actually be. Pantheon has a huge amount of early game damage which sets him up to snowball incredibly quickly. His semi-global ultimate allows him to roam super effectively and come out on top throughout that early to mid game without too much risk either. Pantheon in that mid lane is a classic example of a champion who wants to win early game. His scaling really isn't that great, but the damage and the carry threat at this point is so high that the playstyle is all about being proactive. If you can understand how aggressive you can be on this champion, he's a brilliant choice to play in this patch. Karthus got buffed in the jungle, and he's actually been dominating the bot lane scene in high elo for a while now. Karthus' damage and scaling is just insane, and the fact that he can play so recklessly and deal so much damage in the process means he's really not as risky as people think. Sometimes you see a Karthus and he does nothing and ints, but other times you see him land every single Q and get so much kill participation throughout the whole game with his ultimate. Even if all Karthus does is sit in his jungle and farm and press R every now and again, he can easily carry and influence games. Karthus jungle is undoubtedly stronger this patch since it's buffs to his Q damage to monsters, and there's no doubt that it can carry games, but the only thing you have to be careful of is getting invaded, so it can be a little bit matchup dependent. If you get the right draft for this champion and go against another farming jungler though, you can win a serious amount of games. Finally, for our 10th pick of this patch, it's just gonna have to be Pyke. We actually included Pyke mid in our last 10 new OP picks video, but we just have to express it again how strong this champion is, and additionally, how even stronger he is due to those Umbral Glaive buffs. There are so many reasons why Pyke is just so strong at the moment, and let's start off with how crazy his itemization is. Duskblade and Death Dance are immense with his ultimate resets, granting him stealth and a boatload of healing. As we mentioned already, Umbral Glaive got buffed and it's now stupidly strong and a bit cheaper than the rest of his other itemization. His other options are also in a very good spot now. Ghostblade, Maw, Edge of Night and Lethality in general is just performing super well this season. Pyke's carry potential throughout the early to mid game is absolutely bonkers. He's got early game kill threat, he's got very good skirmishing and dueling power, and his roaming is simply one of the best in the game. His W grants him movement speed, stealth and healing, and this just means he can float up and down the river fishing for Qs at every opportunity. Pyke is definitely one of the best carry champions to play in both the support and the mid lane this patch, but he does take a decent amount of skill. So if you are enjoying him and you know how to play him, keep on playing him. That's going to bring us to the end of this video, all about 10 of the newest and most OP champions picks and builds that you can play and abuse in patch 12.7. We hope you guys enjoyed this video and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.